So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Patrick Grillo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's that time of the day when you have to have an English speaker on the agenda because due to EU regulations, there has to be at least one. Although there is some discussion going on about the version that I speak is actually considered English or not. A key part of digital transformation that you've been hearing about is how you're changing your business. What are you doing? It encompasses a great deal of things. And of course, that strategy also encompasses this idea of Internet of Things. Now, everyone here, or every organization here, is already involved with Internet of Things because if you take the literal translation, PCs, mobile devices, phones, those are all IoT devices. So the question is, what do we do when it goes beyond that? How do we deal with that? And how do we define it? Now, statistics abound all over the place as to how many devices, how many billions, over how many years, and all of that. Now, this is actually a pretty conservative estimate of that. And as I said, we look at all things that are connecting to the internet. So certainly sensors, but phones, PCs, whatever the case may be. It's hard, however, to put a definition on this. I've grabbed this one off the internet, and it's a little bit technical, but it does reasonably well. Talks about the things connecting to the network, collecting information and all of that. Fair enough. I can go with that. But for most people, and I suspect most people in the room, that's not IoT. This is IoT. Who has a trash bin that can post to Facebook when you throw something away? Who has something that your dog can get involved with? Have a little video chat with the dog while he's lonely during the day? Who would like to have a Wi-Fi connected home beer brewing kit? Finally, you're not asleep. Good. Now, it is interesting, and I've been giving this presentation, pitch, whatever you'd like to call it, for a few months now. And I look at this and I say, okay, I see there's the world of dogs is very big in IoT because dogs have this behavior reward sort of mentality. And that fits in very well with this interpretation of IoT. Do something, you get something. Which automatically explains why cats are not really very big in the world of IoT. You really can't get them to do anything, even when they want to do it. Now, it's at this point I would normally change slides and illustrate an example that takes what's on this slide and takes it to the ridiculous. And that's, I don't know if you've seen these, as Sweden has been invaded by these things. I used to talk about these little buttons from Amazon. These are little buttons associated with consumer products, and you could populate them around your house. So if you're in the toilet and you run out of toilet paper, you can push the button, it connects through your wireless network, and there'll be an order of toilet paper the next day at your door. It was also interesting to note there were two buttons in particular, one for dog food and one for cat food. Now, the dogs are generally too dumb to figure that one out. But the cat, he'd figure that one out right away. If I do push that, I've got treats coming to the door the next day. Now, I said I would normally use that example. However, there was, in the world of technology that we work in, there are certain things that are gifts that just keep giving. And there was a headline that I have to mention, although I'm not putting it in the presentation for legal reasons, and I will apologize in advance if I offend anybody. But there was a headline last week of a Canadian sex toy manufacturer who was fined millions of dollars for their connected devices. Or I should, yeah, I said that right. Connected sex toys. I'd like to have been a fly on the wall in the boardroom when that decision was made. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Not only, they had an app on the phone. I guess the original intention was you could give remote control to your lover wherever that lover happened to be around the world. Fair enough. But they were using that same app for collecting data on the usage of these devices. This is a true story. And then they found out that the application itself had several security vulnerabilities, and it could be taken over by somebody. Well, it sounds like that was the purpose of it to begin with, but okay, so that's, I mean, those Amazon buttons don't hold anything to that story. You know, that story has a shelf life, however. I can only use it for so long. But all of those things illustrate the first problem of IoT, and that's the lack of awareness about the dangers of it. Now, we go through this with all technologies. Laptops, mobile phones, mobile devices. It's the cool factor. Hey, look what I can do, rather than what are the consequences of sharing all my personal details with people I don't know all around the world. Now, eventually, unfortunately, because of hacks, because of data breaches, we do develop awareness about it. But that awareness takes time. And even with the number of data breaches that occur, most people still think of this as this is a great thing. Now, I have to admit myself, I always thought of consumer perspective when it comes to IoT until I saw this diagram. Now, you probably can't see it that well, kind of Star Trek-y, Romulan warbird sort of looking thing here. But it maps out by sector, application, devices. And what's connecting it all together is the internet. And what this means is that anything is connected to anything else in the world through the internet. And that's the danger of IoT. You've just opened a massive door to a hacker, and it doesn't matter where it starts. If they want to get there, they can find a way to get there because of all of these things. And I'll give some examples. This, for me, a couple of years ago, was the beginning that opened my eyes to the dangers that I'm talking about today. Let's take a graphic example, though. Russia, 2009, a hydroelectric dam. Now, that thing, those gray circles on the ground labeled power units, those are the turbines. Hundreds of tons steel turbines. One of those turbines, for whatever reason, jumped out of its container. That's the aftermath. Not only this massive piece of metal flying around in an enclosed space, but this was a turbine in a hydroelectric dam. There was high pressure water coming out as well. Now, needless to say, there were considerable deaths in this, and the power station was offline for quite a number of years before they were finally able to fix it. Now, if you do a little bit of research on this, you'll get two conflicting accounts. One account, the official account, says it was due to poor maintenance. That somehow the container, however that turbine is contained, poor maintenance led to it vibration and eventually it escaped. Other accounts will say it was an IoT hack. That a hacker got into the control system and operated the turbine either by adjusting the speed up, increasing, decreasing it, or just turning it up until the turbine was operating outside of its normal band of operation, causing it eventually to fail. That's the face of what IoT can mean. That's the damage that it can bring it, but that's not isolated. Look at these cases. It's an ongoing effort in the United States these days about keeping nuclear power stations safe. That's part of the critical infrastructure. Now you say, okay, building infrastructure, who cares if they get in and play with the heating and air conditioning? But it does become a disruptive factor. An oil rig. To keep an oil rig at sea in the same place takes sophisticated positioning and engines. Excuse me. This one particular rig was so heavily hacked, it was out of service for months before they could clean it up. And when a rig's not at work, that's just a loss. Now the other one, because I flew in today from Nice, this about the airplane. This one made quite a bit of headlines. The gentleman, a well-known white hat hacker, was on a plane, looked down and saw the entertainment system under the seat in front of him and saw an Ethernet jack. I checked mine today. There wasn't the Ethernet jack. But if you see one, what else do? You plug your computer into it just to pass the flight. He claims that he was able to get into the flight control systems through that entertainment system. Now, this gentleman has significant credibility in the industry. And he also claims that he was actually able, not at the same time, but able to get into the systems in the International Space Station as well. All of these are examples of the dangers of IoT. But it's not all bad. The UK last year had a rash of hacks, hackers with a sense of humor. Connected toaster begs the question, why does your toaster have to be connected? But it was a connected toaster, and if it detected white bread, it wouldn't turn on. The same for a freezer. If it detected ice cream in the freezer, it shut itself off. So while we laugh at some of these things, and you look at it, and you got to wonder, and there's a cartoon I have, there's a cartoon I forgot to put into here about what happens when IoT and ransomware meet each other. And all the kitchen appliances are talking to the owner. If you don't do this, you have to pay this and whatnot. The best one was, pay me $25 or I'll tell all your friends on social media you were stupid enough to buy an internet-connected broom. But this brings me to the second problem that we're dealing with, and those are the devices themselves. Because when we're looking at these devices, there are three parameters that we try to focus on: cost, speed, and security. However, you can only have two out of the three. And the way things stand right now, security is the one that goes by the wayside. These things, the majority of these things, are designed to be cheap. They don't have any real processing power in them. You cannot put a client in them. You can't reach them. You can't update them. If there's a problem, you replace it on the next revision. These things will turn on each other because they're so poorly designed. They're designed for the mass market. Now, I'm using generalities here, of course. There are some industries, such as critical infrastructure, where these devices will be more robust. But who has a connected television? Connected VCR or video personal recorder? You think the intelligence in those things is going to keep a hacker out? And that's one of the those connected TVs are one of the key issues. And I think there was a case in the United States recently where a major television manufacturer there was sued by the relevant government authority because they were monitoring your viewing habits and selling that information to advertisers. That's the kind of problems most of these IoT things deal with. So whether it's in an enterprise environment, whether it's in a consumer environment, what we're seeing more and more of today is that the IoT is the weak link in the chain. We've just automatically made it easier for the hacker to get in. Whether you think you have anything of value or not that would be of value to the hacker is immaterial. But like that diagram I showed, everything is connected to everything else. And here's an implication of that connectivity in these devices, that this gentleman, Brian Krebs, is a well-known investigative reporter in the US. He does a lot of investigative reporting on hackers. He's broken several of the major data breaches over the past several years. And as you would expect, his network is always under attack. Well, this time, what made it unique, he was experiencing, now this was last summer, he was experiencing the world's largest DDoS attack of about 600 gigabits per second. His provider, who was giving him service for free to promote themselves, actually had to cut him off because defending that attack was taking away other resources that other customers were starting to suffer. And when they did the analysis, now DDoS attacks are nothing new, but what we see is a generally low amount of bandwidth, megabits per second, generated by hundreds of devices. And then they can use techniques to amplify the effect of these attacks. In this case, some estimates put the botnet that was launching the attack, up to 1 million devices. And what were they made of? Your TVs, your recorders, IP cameras, connected kettles, connected whatever. These things had been mass infected with malware, and they were now being used to launch a DDoS attack. And you think, okay, a DDoS attack against this gentleman, he's a well-known target. He probably has a circle on his back. But for those of you that are not familiar with it, DDoS is just a service you can buy. So a hacker without any skill can buy the rights to use a botnet, and now we've just magnified the tools that are available to them through the use of these different devices. So that begs the question, if all of these problems exist, where do we solve them? Well, as I said, partially with the devices themselves in certain industries, where price is not the sensitive issue, where we're protecting critical infrastructure. Hopefully, as cars become more and more connected, in those environments will have more intelligent devices. But largely, the answer has to lie in the network itself. Now, at this point, I have to diverge. I'm going to ignore for a moment the carrier world, because a lot of these devices will connect to external clouds, or it could be through 5G. It could be through a wide area network being operated specifically for IoT. I want to focus on those devices which are connecting to your networks directly. So now, if we look at the enterprise network, that's actually problem number 3. Because most networks, and certainly the ones that I deal with, the customers I come in contact with, these networks are already facing major problems. And to throw IoT on top of that is going to make that network fall over. So the 3 things that we see in most enterprise networks can be classified as this: borderless, there's a speed issue, and they're complex. Now, each of those adds a security challenge. And what do we mean by borderless? Well, as the networks have evolved and as you've embraced technology, you've gone in, for those of you that have been around a while, even as far back as X25, frame relay, MPLS, the internet, of course, cloud, wireless. While you've adopted or embraced this technology for solid business reasons, at the same time, you've unintentionally eliminated or started to erode the perimeter that you're automatically defending. And since most defensive strategies are outward facing, we want to keep somebody from getting in. If I start putting in a lot of new things, new ways of getting into the network, those traditional perimeter defenses just aren't going to be capable of handling it. And because perimeter defenses by nature are outward looking, once somebody gets in, there's nothing to stop them. The best example that I have of this is with Target in the United States. Now, this goes back to 2013, so it's ancient history. But that attack, which to me was the mother of all attacks, and it really changed the average person on the street's perception of cyber attacks. The hacker wasn't particularly clever. The malware he used was nothing special. He didn't even intend to attack Target. But some technician in an air conditioning company clicked on a phishing email, gave up his login credentials. The hacker got in there. That company, by the way, was using a sample, a trial version of a well-known malware program as their cyber protection. Got into Target, or realized he could get into Target, got into Target, and then realized the entire network was wide open. He could go anywhere, do anything he wanted. And the one thing that he did do that was quite clever, once he finally got to the point of sale information, collecting names, addresses, credit card numbers, he staged it in a number of different areas and then arranged to have file transfers during the normal business day to servers that were situated offshore. Nobody could distinguish the traffic. That was the one thing that he did that was really clever. And it's that one thing that has changed the industry significantly, and then we've seen this rash of additional data breaches over the last several years. Now, I remember it wasn't that long ago when we were arguing between 10 megabits per second and 100 megabits per second. And then it went to a gig, and now 10, 40, and 100. The underlying network has its own version of Moore's Law. It doubles its bandwidth every 2 years. And can the security that you're putting into that network keep up with that? And if it can't, what's the impact? The impact is the applications. Your business slows down. So for a lot of companies, they're forced to make a compromise how much security I can afford to implement, or I won't put any in, or I'll minimize it, and I'll take a risk that I won't be hacked. And then finally, and I think certainly those of us from vendors and in past lives, I think we're all guilty of it. The key strategy that we used to promote was a best of breed strategy. You have a problem, buy the best product in the marketplace to solve that problem. Now, in some areas, that's still a good strategy. But in security, if you're trying to mix and match different vendors together, who's going to make sure, first of all, who's going to deal with that complexity? Who's going to make sure that you're setting up policies that are free of human error? Because any one of those areas, any one of those gaps in coverage can result in a gap to be exploited by the hacker. So while this has been the premier strategy for a number of years, because a number of the data breaches have resulted in taking advantage of this, we've reevaluated or are reevaluating how to approach the issue. But if I take those three, borderless, speed, and complexity, the challenges from a security perspective is that now my security solution has to be broad enough to cover that entire network regardless of the range of technologies. It obviously has to be powerful enough to keep up with the demands for bandwidth in the network itself. And then finally, because the networks are more complex than ever, and there is a skills shortage, how much intelligence can you put into the network and automate some of the decisions that are taking place? What can the network do to help you to react when you are breached? And what do we mean by broad? Yes, it means a range of products, a range of technologies, but those products have to work together. So from you as a management perspective, you have visibility across the entire piece. Powerful, can the products that you're choosing go ahead and match the needs, not only of today, but of tomorrow? And then finally, the automated to go ahead and be able to help you find problems, not be a problem in itself. Now, it's those three philosophies, broad, powerful, and automated, that drive Fortinet's philosophy of how we approach cybersecurity. And we have this thing called, this philosophy or framework, a vision called the Fortinet Security Fabric. And it's incorporating those three things I just mentioned. And it's taking the right mix of technologies that work together, technologies that support each other, to deal not only with IoT, but to deal with the other security challenges that we're seeing. And whether it's the endpoint or in the data center, putting the right mix of technologies working together extends or covers the network, if you will, in a secure blanket. Blocking as much as possible from getting in, and then detecting in case anything does get in. Now, how does that play to IoT? It's just an extension of it, that we can create policies and determine, okay, some devices we can manage, those are your PCs. Some devices we can go ahead and tolerate. We can identify them and put it in a group that says internet only. And then finally be able to detect when there's a new device on the network that shouldn't be there. It's all about learning the network, segmenting it, and protecting it. So if you're looking at IoT, ask yourself these questions. can my network deal with the challenge I'm about to face, that I'm about to throw on it? And more importantly, today it's IoT. You know, I could just as easily be talking about the new European regulations, GDPR, and would lead me to the same place. And it's these sorts of things that you have to ask yourself. Yeah, this is it today, but what about tomorrow? I hope I've given you something to think about. Please, if I have, myself and my colleagues will be in the Tech Expo area. Please come by, ask any questions. We'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.